2, 3, 4. Let me tell you, PuckPedia, stats, contracts, and caps, it's all there for you. One-stop shop for your hockey information. It's a hockey sensation, so log on, log on, log on. If you give a puck, go to PuckPedia.com.
PuckPedia Cap Central, November 20th. It's Keith Kavanaugh alongside Hart Levine. Hart, how you doing today?
Doing great. How you doing?
I'm great. You know, it's Thursday. It's our weekly live salary cap insights and rumbling show. Hart, before we kind of got started, Hart had some breaking news on the LTIR front. If you want to lead off with that.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Tampa Bay activating Nick Paul off LTIR and are adding Victor Hedman to LTIR. So, we knew McDonough was hurt. He'd been out for a while. Hedman, I think that's a, more recent development, and it looks like he is going to be out long term. So Hedman is on LTIR. That means he has to miss at least 10 games and 24 days. They'll be out, the big defenseman, for a while.
Yeah, that probably puts his return not until, maybe right before the Christmas break. So, tough blow for Tampa. He's obviously their best defenseman, but it probably isn't an injury. I don't think that should keep him out long term, is in like eyeing the Olympics for Sweden.
Yeah, not sure, right? I haven't seen a lot of reports about it. Just working on the cap math, and found out he's the guy they put on LTIR. Again, considering they had some other candidates like McDonough, you'd think that means that he's the most likely, or he'll be out longer. What is that going to be the minimum, or could he be out even longer? Guess we'll have to find out.
Yep, and that gives, the new rule this year, Tampa would only get the $3.82 million LTIR cap benefit from that. And that's what we do on this show. We break news as it comes in, contracts, And another thing I saw today, someone replied to one of your tweets and was asking, does PuckPedia have a YouTube channel? Yes, we have a YouTube channel.
Sure do.
We're live on YouTube every week for this show. We also do a weekly PuckPedia hockey show. We had Steve Dangle on the most recent episode, one of our best episodes. Steve gave us a solid 25, 30 minutes. Like, we didn't have too much time with Steve. He's got a lot going on, but the amount he gave us, and I thought it was a really good interview. We talk about the NHL social media rights, obviously the Toronto Maple Leafs, but also his upcoming, being a crazy Leafs fan and then turn that into a great career. And he's now been doing this for 19 seasons.
Yeah, and hope people check it out, because we got him. You got him talking about his journey, how he got to where he is, and a little bit about NHL media. I think if you get a chance, people should check out past episodes. I'm really proud of the episodes you did with Chase Prisky, Aaron Schwartz. Really hearing about how people grinded and got to be playing in the NHL in one case, or working in the NHL in the other case, and just what goes into it. I think there's just a lot of cool stories. One of them in particular had a lot of F-bombs and colorful language in there. So I think, check it out. It's just, we hear a lot about the guys that are the current GM or the current star player, but personally, I'm really interested in the stories of everyone else around the game, and how they grinded and got to a spot, and advice that they have, and really cool stories along the way.
Yeah, shout out Aaron Schwartz for the F-bombs. He decided to just crack open a Coors Light and just let it rip, which we really love, because we get that true authentic stuff. And I think a lot of Hurricanes fans really enjoyed the front office's view on the Marty Necas situation and why they only went 2 years on that deal, walking him right to UFA. But yeah, even like David Ludwig talking about the JJ Peterka deal, or some of my idiot friends in the media like Johnny Lazarus, Pete Blackburn, like really enjoyed those conversations with those guys as well. So I think we got a wide array of people on there, and we're going to keep going and keep at it. We got some good guests lined up in the coming weeks, so definitely tune in. But we'll switch gears here, and we'll keep it mostly focused on what the point of this show is, and that's just to give a weekly update on some salary cap stuff and just things that are happening in the NHL world. So let's kick it off with the Adrian Kempe extension. So Adrian Kempe re-upped with the Los Angeles Kings. Another one bites the dust of the 2026 UFA free agent class. Kempe is signed for 8 years, $10.625 million AAV. It will be 10.2% of the cap, assuming a $104 million cap ceiling next year. Kempe has a full no-move clause in years 1 to 4, and then a modified no-trade clause in 15 teams in years 5 through 8. It's heavy signing bonus, too. A lot of structure on this deal. Almost all of his first 4 years are in signing bonus, and then the rest of the deal is mostly salary. He's coming off of a 4-year, $5.5 million AAV deal, which was a really good team-friendly deal for the Kings as a player who is almost a point per game in those years. He has 19 points through 20 games this year, 6 goals, 13 assists. 35 goals last season. And he also came in on that deal less than the other big extensions just signed, like Kaprizov, Eichel, McDavid, Natchez, Kyle Connor. Hart, what are your thoughts on this kind of deal for Adrian Kempe?
Yeah, I think of those recent contracts you mentioned, the one that makes the most sense to compare to is Natchez. Both wingers, both score. Natchez is 3 years younger and signed for about 900,000 more. So I guess like who would you rather have for the next couple of years, and who would you rather have for 8 years? I mean, you look at their playoff performance. I think Kempe has shown that he's a gamer and he scores the big goals and he can get gritty. He could play solid defensively. So that's probably, if you had to pick right now, maybe you'd put him ahead. But yeah, you wonder then in 4, 5, 6 years from now, what do those deals look like? And, how do they rank? And so for now, you probably feel good having Kempe at 900,000 less. But I guess you have to see down the road. I wonder, like, what would that number have been if they made him an offer on July 1st that was compelling? Because I think, that this number only grew as other contracts were signed, like you mentioned, Kaprizov, Natchez, even guys like Logan Cooley, who haven't accomplished anywhere near what Kempe has signed. Those all have just been really driving up the prices. And so from an LA perspective, like, could they have gotten this deal done at like 10 and a quarter on July 1st? Who knows, right? But that's the way the market's gone. And I think we've seen players that are willing to wait and bet on themselves. The price is only going up. And now if you look at the remaining free agent class, I think now I circle Tuck as the last kind of big name guy there. And is he going to take an offer, before the end of the season, or is he going to wait and be like really the star of the class, which, very good player, has a lot of positives. I don't know if we would have typically build a free agent class as like headlined by Alex Tuck. But, if you're looking from his perspective, why would you sign now? Unless the number is so big that it just like knocks your socks off, you might as well wait until next summer. And anyone that really needs to plug a big forward hole, like he's the only guy that can really move the needle of the free agents.
Yeah, right now it's looking like the big 3 free agent forwards are Alex Tuck and then Artemi Panarin of the New York Rangers and Nick Schmaltz of Utah are kind of like the big 3 now, unfortunately. No discredit to them, but it's a little different than leading with Kaprizov, McDavid, and Eichel.
Yeah.
But then to your
Panarin's
point,
34. Panarin's a great player, but 34, right? So
right, like he's not signing a long-term deal. Like at most, he probably gets 5 years, but I imagine teams will probably be pushing for like a 3 to 4 year term for Panarin.
Oh yeah, or you never know. I could do like a Brad Marchand deal, and where it's he's going to end up on the contract on LTIR potentially, so maybe it does stretch out. But in terms of like how many years are you going to get a really good player out of this deal? I mean, you got to look at like a Schmaltz or a Tuck are more in that window. I'm just looking through the list here. There's really no one else compelling that's like under 32 years old, right? I mean, who as a forward, it's pretty bare. So yeah, you can go for guys in their mid 30s or early 30s, and maybe you can squeeze a few years out. But those are the deals that certainly carry more risk, later in the contract. I guess though we've seen from a lot of front offices that's usually someone else's problem. So it's like, you might as well get the guy in your roster and be better for the next couple of years, and let the next guy deal with what happens, when the player's 37 or 38.
Exactly. The turnover on GMs is pretty high in the NHL. And then to your point, too, like, so the Kings will now have projected $23 million in cap space for next season with 16 active roster players signed. So not a ton of work and players to sign for them with all that space. So I feel like they put themselves in a pretty good position moving
Yeah.
forward. And they're also a good team, too. They're one of the top teams in the Pacific Division. So definitely a good deal, a guy they needed to get signed, because if you lose a guy like that, who's going to replace him? I don't really know. You would have to probably go through the trade markets to replace him. But yeah, good deal for team, good deal for player. And I think to your point, the deal could have looked different on July 1st, but it also could have looked different if he waited a few more months too. So I think both sides just wanted to get this deal done, and it got done. So that was the one big extension. And then we can go to the other one that got signed, and that's Adam Lowry of the Winnipeg Jets. He signed a 5-year, $5 million AAV contract. That'll be 4.8% of the cap for next season. Hart, I noticed there was no trade clauses reported. I just want to confirm that that's the case, or that we might see those in the future.
No, so this deal was agreed to late last night, and the paperwork wasn't all done. So still tracking that down. So come
Okay,
back
so there's
later today on PuckPedia, and it'll be updated if there is. Or now we have a little note saying that the breakdown's not confirmed yet.
cool. Yeah, and I assume just based off and we'll talk about trade protection in a second, but I assume just based on how deals get signed in the NHL that this one will have some trade protection. But he's coming off of another 5-year deal, average $3.25 million AAV. So this deal's a little different because Adam Lowry will be 33 years old when the deal kicks in. So this goes till he's age 38. For Winnipeg side, he's the captain of their team. He's not an offensive dynamo. He averaged about 35 points over the last 3 seasons each. So, a little less than a half a point per game kind of player, but super strong defensively on the penalty kill, an ideal 3C to match up against your team's top lines. Hart, I have an interesting stat for you that I want to pull from Adam Lowry. There are currently 640 players this year who have played 75 plus 5v5 minutes this season. There's only one player that hasn't been on the ice for a goal against.
It's Adam Lowry.
Adam Lowry.
That was easy. I can do that one.
He's the only player in the NHL.
Wow.
640 guys have had 75 plus 5v5 minutes. Adam Lowry not on the ice for a goal against. In 5 games with Iafallo, Niederreiter, they have 57% expected goal share going against teams' top lines. They're 3-0 on the goals. So I think just, what are your thoughts on this deal? Like for me, it's a little expensive maybe for a 3C, but with the rising salary cap, that gets diluted each season. And he's really just like a staple. He seems like a good guy in the locker room. I know his dad too was an assistant coach there for a bit. He might still be, honestly. But like he just seems like a good team player, and he does exactly what you want in a captain.
Yeah, I mean, typically, your first reaction to a 32-year-old, 6'5" guy signing for 5 years is, "Whoa, that seems long." And it's certainly, I'm sure, not the term that the Jets wanted. But if you look at the number, like again, we're so used to a flat cap for so many years that now the cap going up, it's hard to get our head around the numbers. But I just did some quick math, like $5 million cap hit when the cap was 82 million, it is like 3.9 million, right? So that's the kind of frame that we're used to. If you think about, would you want Lowry in that when we're in a flat cap, would you want him at 3.9 million for age 33 to 37? Again, I think you feel really good about it for the first couple of years, and you worry a little bit about towards the end, but that's not a super owner's contract. And I think, in a couple of years, or like years 3, 4, 5, when the cap is significantly more, it's going to be like effectively, like 3.5 million in kind of relative terms. It's not going to be that bad. That's a contract that worst case, if he's on LTIR towards the end, because big strong guy, typically that you start to see some problems in their mid to late 30s. You can survive that. You can maybe deal that contract at some point. And if he's just like becomes a 4th line center the last couple of years, again, it's not a contract that's going to kill you. Also, Winnipeg's not typically right at the cap team, and I think as we see the cap increasing even more, like they'll always be sort of close, but they're not typically a team that's every single dollar is needs to be managed. So I think it's your captain. It's a really, really solid defensive player, like you mentioned, chips in a little offensively. You really like the deal for the first 2-3 years, and you just kind of deal with the last couple.
Exactly. And I think that's how a lot of teams are focusing now anyways. And like we mentioned, as the cap grows, it's less onerous in terms of just the percentage of the cap. So a deal today might look different 2-3 years from now. And Winnipeg's in a little similar spot to LA. So they're projected to have $25 million in cap space with 14 active roster players signed for next season. So a little more work to do on the active roster front, but similar cap situation. They got some space to make some moves, and most of their core is pretty locked up.
Yep. And, that's the thing. There's going to be a lot of teams with cap space, but we just talked about the free agent class and like, who are they going to spend it on? Right. And I think that's why we're seeing teams really making sure they're locking up their RFAs or re-signing their UFAs. But we're going to talk now about the trade market potentially, but it's a really interesting time where the trade market is pretty locked up, and there's a number of reasons for that. And then you also aren't potentially going to have free agents to spend money on. So teams have some money to spend. They want to spend money. They want to make their teams better. There's not many teams that are trying to move down in in the kind of roster building stage. Most teams in the league now are trying to get better. And so it's a really interesting market where how do teams do that? If you can't spend money on a free agent and it's hard to make a trade, what do you do?
Yeah, that's a great point. I think that leads into what a segue, what a transition by Hart right here. That leads into our next topic, which is the trade protection. So, Chris Johnson wrote an article in the Athletic, Hart's buddy CJ, and he pulled a stat from PuckPedia, and he noted that 36% of of players on an NHL roster who have played a game this season have at least some trade protection. And then when you actually take that number for the eligible players, so that's players who are not on entry level or have RFA status, that number is actually 62% when accounting for those guys. So basically, only 38% of players who are eligible for trade protection do not have it in their contract. And that's mostly, bottom pairing defensemen, second goaltenders, bottom line forwards. And so a lot of the NHL is locked up in the trades protections. And like right now, we're looking at the NHL landscape and you're hearing rumblings that there's maybe two teams right now that are pretty open for business. And that would be the Calgary Flames and the St. Louis Blues. And just looking at the top guys on those two teams who teams want, Nazem Kadri is the top of the list of the Flames on the forward group, and he has a 13-team no-trade list. Blake Coleman's the other forward that has been seeming to gain some attention, and he has a 10-team yes trade list. I know it's not called yes trade list, but you got no trade list and you got trade lists, so they can say where they want to be traded or where they don't want to be traded. And then on the defense, you got Rasmus Andersson, who's been talked about in trade rumors for over a year now due to his contract. Really good contract, less than $5 million expiring this year, but probably needs an extension to the team that he gets dealt. And he has a 6-team no trade list. So that's hard to do business sometimes when you have all these no trade lists. You look at the Blues, for example. Doug Armstrong has said they're completely open for business, and Jordan Kyrou is obviously the guy a lot of people are talking about, but he has a full no trade clause, so he needs to approve any sort of deal, no list or nothing from. He needs to talk to management and approve that. And then also you got Brayden Schenn, their captain, who has a 15-team no trade list. So a lot of trade protection right now, Hart.
Yeah, and I think. When I pulled those numbers, it was pretty illuminating that basically a third of the league of all players that have played a game and are on an NHL roster have some protection, and 2/3 of the players that are eligible. We should point out. So yeah, when it's a potential UFA season, that's the only time you're eligible for trade clause. So if a player is 2 years from UFA and signs a 4-year deal, he can only have trade protection in those last 2 years. So when I look at who could actually have protection, to say that 2/3 have some, that's a lot. Now, not all trade protections the same. Like you mentioned, some that are full no trades or no moves that are very restrictive. And there's some players that have like a 6-team no trade, which, again, it makes it more difficult for the GM versus no protection, but at least there's a lot of teams that can move the player to. But I think, when you combine all these players with trade protection, the changes in the CBA in terms of no double retention is one, and in terms of the benefit you get from LTIR in the season, and then the playoff cap, where there's basically no benefit in the playoff cap for teams that have accrued space and then spent it at the deadline. It's just like a whole lot of factors pointing to hard to make trades, like hard to move guys, hard to make the space to add guys, and if you were to make the space to add a guy, potentially then hard to fit them in your playoff space. So not for people like us that like the trade action, it's kind of disappointing. I do think that could lead to more of like what we call like hockey trades, like players for player trades, both teams trying to be better. Maybe it's like a forward for a D or a younger guy for an older guy. We could see some of that where the salaries sort of match up more and both teams are trying to address an area of need or a change of scenery. And so maybe that we could see some unexpected trades like that are really interesting and surprising. But I think the traditional like teams unloading players and teams adding and loading up on rentals and that typical market, I think is going to be pretty hard to happen. And then we just talked about like the free agent market. Again, it's not like teams can say, well, let's sit back and we'll get guys in free agency, or let's trade for a pending UFA because there's less of those. So it's just a really interesting time in hockey where the traditional like cycles of the types of transactions and when they happen, I think is going to be different. And so there'll be extra marks for creativity for GMs that can really grind and find a match and a combination of assets in and out that will work. And so, there's the teams that typically always get something done, and I would expect they still will. Like, I'm sure Tampa will do something, right? And the usual suspects, but it's a really fascinating time to watch, and hopefully it doesn't lead to just nothing happening. Hopefully it leads to some nice surprises.
Yeah, I mean, I am one who like loves the trade deadline day, and you're, on your phone constantly refreshing the feed, trying to see who gets moved and what kind of money. And sometimes you have that lull of like this guy got traded, and you're like waiting 20 minutes to see what the return was, because
Yeah.
that totally is a huge impact on the deal, because you could love a trade or hate a trade solely based on the return. And for us, like I think the trade deadline's a good time, obviously a great time for Puckpedia, but just like hockey fans in general and just entertainment of the game. And that'll lead into a Q&A in a little bit on a question about that retention that you were asking earlier. But I did want to bring up too, while we're going through this trade protection. So I had a fun exercise this morning where I went through Puckpedia and I was scrolling through and looking at every team's trade protections. And I wanted to point out a few interesting things that
Okay.
caught my eye this morning. So the first was, I found the player. Do you know who the player is that has the smallest no trade list, and how many teams are on that list?
Good question. I think Matthias Janmark with Edmonton has like a 5 or 6 team no trade.
Okay, yes, he does, but there's also a bunch of players that have 5 or 6 teams. So
Okay.
the lowest is 3 teams, and
Okay.
he's on Columbus.
Oh, I'm not going to cheat and look it up. Huh. Um, I don't know. You tell me. Or
It's
let's see
Charlie
if people
Coyle.
listening want to. Oh, Charlie Coyle. Okay. Wow.
Yeah, too late.
3 teams. So maybe he has like I don't know, he doesn't want to live with it where his in-laws live or something. There's a couple of cities that he just really doesn't want to go to.
Yeah, maybe he wants to avoid the state of California or something. But yeah, so Charlie
Wow.
Coyle has the smallest list of no trade. Then there's also, I found one player who's buried in the minors that has no trade protection. Do you know who that is?
Nah, you got me stumped.
All right, so that's Detroit Red Wings Justin Hall. He has a 10-team no
Oh
trade
yeah.
list right now.
Well, and I
But
think
I mean,
that's
I
a
was finding
good
it super interesting.
And I think that's a good point, like the difference between a no trade list and a no move, right? Like a no trade list, you can certainly go to the minors, you can go on waivers. You can't put like Adirondack on your no trade list. If you get waived and sent down, you have to go. Or you could do like David Kampf and decide to not play, and then ultimately your contract gets terminated and you don't get paid. So those are your
Yep.
options.
There was also Jack Roslovic's is interesting too. So he has a 4-team no trade
Yeah.
list, but it commenced on November 1st. So I think maybe they wanted to make sure that it was going to be a good fit for the rest of the season
Yeah.
before, like, so now that November 1st has passed, I assume, does that turn into a full no trade, or what's the situation on that one?
I think no, I think his is a full no trade until then. Yeah, he had a full no move until
Got it.
November 1st, and then starting November 1st, he has a 4-team approved trade list, so he can be traded now to 4 teams that are on his list. I think the commentary around that at the time was like it's kind of when you start a new job, like a probationary period. So he's not going to get traded or anything while he gets up to speed, and then after that, if it's not a fit, they can trade him to, assuming the teams that he was probably interested in signing with, that he ultimately picked Edmonton over. There's probably a couple teams that he was fine with going to.
Yeah. And then I found one team, the team that has the most trade protection. They have 14 players on trade protection. Do you have any clue who that would be?
14 teams with Vegas.
Close. I think Vegas did have a bunch. I think they're probably around 10 or 11. So it's Carolina.
Florida.
Carolina
Oh,
has
Carolina.
14.
Okay. They're an interesting one. I'm not sure if this is on your list of factoids, but they actually have. I remember Taylor Hall. I just pulled it up. They have conditional trade clauses, no trade clauses. So Taylor Hall in 27-28, he
It's like
has a
based on
10.
points or something, right?
Yeah. So if in 26-27 he does not score 35 points, then his no move kind of downgrades to a 10-team no trade in 27-28. I think that was the first one I saw with a conditional trade clause, and there's another one or two that happened after that, but I think this was the first one I saw like that, which is perfectly legal. It's just more complicated and more things to track. But yeah, that's an interesting way of doing it. Like basically, if you don't meet our expectations, then we're allowed to trade you to some teams. Like your trade clause becomes less restrictive.
And that's why I love a team like the Carolina Hurricanes and Eric
Yeah.
Tulsky and like his innovation, because you don't see any other teams doing it based off of the production. And then some teams get stuck with a contract that they might want to move. And, I hate to do this in year one, but Edmonton with Trent Frederick, who has 1 point so far in the season, he might be a guy that they would want to move. And they wish they put some point protection in that deal. But sometimes you sign a player on July 1 that you think is going to be something. And then by February 1, he's not that player anymore. And, I think production's a big part of that. Yeah, I mean, there's also
I
some.
found another conditional one with Carolina. So Eric
Okay.
Robinson, he has an 8-team no trade for the first 3 years, and then that will extend to year 4 if he plays 75% of games in year 3 and averages 12 minutes or more of ice time. So in
Yeah.
year 3, if he doesn't play 75% of the games and average 12 or more minutes more, he has no more trade protection. If he does do that, he gets another year of an 8-team no trade list. So
That's
I guess it's kind of
unbelievable.
like anyone in a job. Your boss tries to give you incentives, so you're performing and focusing on the things they want you to focus on. So if he's playing a decent amount, he gets more of a benefit of more trade protection.
I love it. And then there's also just one more thing on trade protections too. There are a few players who have like full no trade clauses in the beginning of the year that then transition to no trade list. Past, I think it was San Jose has 2 guys. So they have Klingberg. He has a full no trade, becomes a 14-team no trade list on 130. And then the same thing with Skinner. His just becomes an 8-team yes trade list. Dadonov too for the Devils has a full no trade clause until March 1st, and his becomes a 10-team no trade list on March 1st.
Yeah,
So right before trade deadline.
those deals are typically like a 1-year deal where it's like, okay,
I
come
think all
in.
3 of those guys are on 1 years too.
We're not going to trade you the first part of the season, and then these are not in Dadonov's case, but in the San Jose case, like we're probably not a playoff team. We're going to move you towards the deadline, and we'll give you some control over it. But that's I think it's like a mutual thing. You come play well, then we're going to move you, and you have a little bit of control over that.
Yeah, it is unfortunate because it feels like a lot of these GMs are now handing these trade protections out like candy. Like we
Yeah.
mentioned, there's just so many players in the league that now have some sort of trade protection, which, I get it because on the one side, like the agents are going to argue that, this player and this player has it. So why can't my guy have it? And I think that GMs have now gone down a rabbit hole. But at the same time, it really limits the flexibility of these GMs, and it also limits the entertainment for the fans during trade deadline because you're going to see less moves due to players not wanting to waive it because it is their contractual right to not have to waive it.
And it is like it's a cycle that's hard to get out of because there's teams that are like very adamant against trade protection, like St. Louis, for example, for a long time. But like ultimately, that's part of what cost them Pietrangelo, right? But the bonuses and the clauses. So like if you want to be competitive, you want to sign the best players, like you have to give those clauses, and then it starts to filter down where players that maybe aren't at the top of the tier, they want some protection. And again, like you don't want to give it to them. Someone else is going to give them an 8-team no trade. So if you don't match it or come up with something close, you're not going to get the player.
Look at
And it's
Nashville, for
yeah,
example, right? Like they never gave out trade protection and they basically didn't give it to Ryan O'Reilly, but they're like, we'll do right by you. But then when July 1st comes the next year, when they sign Stamkos and Marchessault and Brady Shea, they have to give those guys
yeah.
trade protection in order to get those guys. And then they have to go back to Ryan O'Reilly and be like, sorry, we didn't give you the no trade, but essentially you have a no trade because we won't do wrong by you. And so I think that's another point.
And now the next guy they sign, it's going to be hard to say we don't give out trade protection when they just did, right? So you've got,
Yep.
you've now set as precedent that there are exceptions to your trade protection, and so yeah, like who's the next RFA to sign there, right? I guess maybe
Well,
that's a problem. They don't
Evangelista just
necessarily have
signed.
any big name ones, but yeah, like they're going to need to give trade protection now, and it's going to be hard to make that argument that we don't do it.
Yep. Yeah. So trade protection, big thing, and we'll talk about it more kind of as the trade deadline comes up. And just let's wrap up the episode here. I know we're going, a little over our 30-minute threshold that we like to keep it, but we got 2 good questions, I think, for the Q&A. The first one actually is kind of, actually both are semi-trade related, which really works out. So the first question is, why would players have a no move and a no trade clause? So, for example, Sam Reinhart in Florida has a full no move clause, but then also has a 16-team no trade list.
Yeah, so the no move, the one benefit of it is it protects against waivers. So if you have a no move, you can't go on waivers. You can go on waivers for purposes of a buyout, but not for purposes to be sent down. So the basically if in the negotiation the player wants the no trade but also doesn't want to go on potentially be on waivers, that's the compromise, is that when they have both, the no move portion means that you can't be put on waivers without your permission, and then the no trade portion of the no move is then adjusted to be that 16 team or whatever team no trade clause. So when you see that it's both, it means no waivers, and then for the trade protection, it goes to like the number of teams in the clause.
Is there like so a no move, just so I'm getting this right. So like if a player has a no move, they could still be traded,
No, if they only have a no
right?
move, they can't be traded or put on waivers. But if they have a no move with a partial no trade, then the trade portion of the no move defaults to or goes to how many teams on the no trade.
Got it. Okay. So if a player has a no move, they can't be sent on waivers or traded. If they have a no
Correct.
move with a partial no trade, they can't be put on waivers, but they can get traded to a certain amount of
To
teams.
based on the teams on the no trade. Yeah. So the no move is like nothing can happen. But then if you add a partial no trade, it removes the full trade protection from the no move and replaces it with the trade protection in the trade clause.
Perfect. Great insight there. And then the second question too has to do with the new rule in the CBA with the retention. So this person just wanted to get clarity on the day, I guess, how many days the gap is from when you can do a retention trade, and then also if you think that we're gonna see kind of a pseudo first trade deadline for some of these players, like that might have value in doing a double retention deal. So let's say I'm just going to use Steven Stamkos as an example because we're talking about the Predators. Let's say a team wants to trade him like to St. Louis or to San Jose, not a competitive team, and Nashville retains $2 million. Do you think they would trade him maybe like, let's call it this week? So then when the trade deadline comes around, they could then do a double retention in the following week?
So the restriction is 75 league days. So a player can't be retained again within 75 league days. So if you work backwards, like from the trade deadline, which is first week of March, that means sometime, mid-December, that's going to be the 75 days. So yeah, so if a player's going to be double retained, they have to be traded before 75 days before the next trade, which again would be sometime middle of December. Do I think that a guy like Stamkos? No, because that's part of the problem with this rule is what's he going to do for those 75 days? He's going to need to play. Does he want to get traded to, I don't know, pick a bottom feeding team with lots of cap space to Calgary and play there for 75 days and then get traded? Like, no. So basically that's not going to happen. I think if there's players that maybe not at that high of a cap hit, that maybe don't have a full no trade clause or no move clause, like maybe then you could see it. But again, like it's kind of an awkward situation. Like we typically don't see guys get moved twice, especially if where they got moved the first time, the team knows it's just like a temporary fit. I mean, we see that sometimes, like Luke Schenn, went to Pittsburgh for a few days, but it was only for a little bit of time. It was right around the deadline. But to go for like 2.5 months on almost like you're on a filling in for someone part time,
Yeah.
like or whatever, is
And
just
all
kind of
parties
weird.
know
We
that
don't,
that's the situation.
yeah, we don't see that. So I'm not gonna say it's impossible, but I would be shocked if a player with trade protection would waive it to go park themselves somewhere for 75 days. It would have to be someone, I think, that doesn't have trade protection. So I would
Yeah.
say my vote is that would not happen for Stamkos.
Okay, but not even Stamkos. I was just saying, like maybe in general.
Yeah, it's possible. But again, like the team kind of in the middle would need to know they're going to get a better asset than what they got. Like when they would do the double retention in the past, the team at the time knows they're getting a 4th or 5th round pick, right? And that's it, and it's all negotiated. But like they didn't have any risk. What's the risk if you trade for a guy in mid-December and
Get hurt.
doesn't play well or he gets hurt? Now you gave up assets to get the guy. I guess you could work out something like, based on how you trade him for later, you then make another trade back with the original team, but that starts to get really complicated. So it's just, I think the NHL is going to basically get what they want, and it's going to be the end of double retention trades. And we should say it's 75 league days. So like, let's say a guy with term on his contract is traded at the trade deadline. It's not like he could be traded again with retention in the summer, because there'd only be 40 league days after the trade deadline. So he wouldn't be able to be traded again until like after a month has passed into the new season. So it's not like 75 days on the calendar. It's 75 league days. So once the season ends, that stops the clock, and it would only continue again in the new season. So, because at first when I saw that rule, I thought, oh, maybe we would see that, like a guy gets traded towards the end of the season and then could get moved again in the summer. But no, they made it league days. So I think they'll get what they want. And I would, we could check our friends with CoolBet if they make a line on it, but I'd probably put some money on we'll never see another double retention trade again.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. And yeah, like Hart mentioned, yeah, our friends over at CoolBet, presenting this show, PuckPedia Cap Central. If you go to puckpedia.com/CoolBet, you can get in on the action today. Stay cool, bet responsibly. Puckpedia.com/CoolBet.
I'm just
Yeah,
teeing you up for the segues today. Wow.
I know you're putting them on a tee, Hart, and I'm knocking them right off. Going 250 right down the middle on the fairway.
That's right.
But yeah, cool. That's all the time we have for you guys on PuckPedia Cap Central. Tomorrow morning, 10 a.m., we're going to be doing a live stream using PuckPedia's Puck GM to build Team Canada's Olympic roster. A lot of discourse over the past few days, I would say. It's obviously been leading up to the Olympics, but now with all these younger guys kind of playing out of their minds, I think a lot of people are really talking about who's going to be on this Olympic roster. And I went through the lineups, and I have my picks, and it's not going to be the guys I think necessarily are going to be on Canada, but the roster I've constructed in my head is very versatile. They can kill penalties. They can, top heavy. And I think it would be a good lineup that would compete with anyone and kind of blow the waters, unfortunately, at every team, including the U.S. But Team Canada's loaded, U.S. is loaded, even Sweden, Finland. Like, it's going to be a great time, and we're going to use Puck GM, which is a great feature to help build this team, and we'll see how much over the salary cap they'll be.
So, Doug Armstrong, Kyle Dubas, the Team Canada brass, if you've been waiting to find out who Keith says should be on the roster, tune in tomorrow and he'll tell you, and then you could pack it in and your roster's set. Just follow Keith's advice.
The good news, too, is Kyle Dubas is on Twitter, so we can just tag him in it, and he'll definitely watch it and probably take our advice for the picks.
They could save some flights here scouting, and there you go. They got Keith's roster. That's it.
Perfect. Well, yeah, we're looking forward to that. 10 a.m. tomorrow Eastern time. But yeah, that's all the time we have for you on PuckPedia Cap Central. We'll probably not do next week just because Thursday is Thanksgiving. Maybe do a Wednesday show. But yeah, follow along on X, Twitter to get all that info. And yeah, so like we said, subscribe to the YouTube. Great episode with Steve Dangle yesterday. Good guests lined up. And yeah, just keep following along all the good stuff.
Thanks, everyone.
PuckPedia.